Sport for Good is where we just left off, didn't we? And now we're going to have a broader discussion on the role of team sport philanthropy. It's a real pleasure for me to open the session and hand over to Neil Duffy, who's the CEO of Purpose Plus Sport. Neil has held the most senior positions in a number of companies across many countries as well, working extensively in the sports business. Neil's recognized as a thought leader in sustainability and purpose and partnership marketing. Just a couple of examples of where Neil has put his talents to use. He was closely involved in the strategies to put on the first ever Zero Waste, Zero Carbon America's Cup, and the most shared, participatory, giving, sustainable, and commercially successful Super Bowl in history. So if you're looking for a bit of thought leadership, we have it here in the shape of Neil. I'm going to hand over to you to introduce your panel, and thanks very much for being with us, Neil.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm wondering if we should get you all standing up and jumping on your chairs to wake up, or do we need to do that, or are we all present and ready to get going? We're present, good. I know we're in the last innings of what's been 2 fantastic days of inspiration. A bit of a shift change now in terms of the discussion that we're going to have with this amazing panel that LA84 have put together for this session. And I think if we take one thing out of this session today, it's some inspiration around what's possible when you figure out how to use the power of sport to inspire people to do amazing things. And each of our panelists here today represent organizations that have done that. It's quite a mix. We've got, I think, probably one of the oldest professional sports franchises in LA. Is that right? I think probably one of the first ones. Certainly the eldest on this panel. We've got one of the newest. Actually, you've been here for longer than you've been here for, so that's really interesting. A team that's trying to make its way into a new market. And then we have an organization that represents the interests of the players that are kind of key to all of this. So I'm going to introduce each of our panelists, and I'll just go around to the table here quickly. So first of all, it's Jeffrey Pollock, so that's the third one on the list. We should have set ourselves in the right order here. But Jeffrey is with the Los Angeles Chargers, and I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. We'll explore more about what that means shortly. Alina, that's that one there, from Los Angeles Football Club. Appropriate that you're here today, given that the World Cup's underway. And then we have Nicole Whiteman, who's the one at the end there, from the LA Dodgers, and then Sherry Deans, who's the one in the middle here from the National Basketball Players Association Foundation. So great panel. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us today. And Nicole, I'm going to start with you. And the reason for that is that I think this, of everybody that's sitting around having this discussion today, the Dodgers are really an organization that's embraced this idea of using sport for good for many, many years. You have a very developed program, probably the most developed of everybody that's sitting here today. Tell us a bit about that, and as you do, why it's important to the team to play that role, the role that it does in society here in LA.
Thank you. So I'm going to kind of speak from the foundation perspective today, if that's okay. I oversee the Dodgers Foundation, as Neil mentioned, as the executive director. I've been with the organization 5 seasons now. And about 6 years ago, we changed ownership groups. And while the Dodgers Foundation has been around since 1995, 6 years ago, we decided that we wanted to deepen the impact that we are having within the Los Angeles community. And yes, for years, we have had programs, and we've had sort of this idea of making sure that we were giving back to fans throughout the season just as much as they've given to the team. But I will say that in the last 5 years, we really decided to deepen that impact and to really be true to the mission of impacting underserved youth in challenged neighborhoods here in Los Angeles. And to your point, we do believe that there is a lot of power in baseball. And I say that directly and indirectly in the sense that we can create a significant impact off the field as much as we can in Dodger Stadium. We believe that the work that we do is bigger than baseball. 5 years ago, we had one program. It was Dodgers Dream Fields, and we could talk about that a little bit, but we build baseball fields in underserved communities. And we built those fields, but we weren't measuring the impact that we had. We didn't have programming. We were not directly serving youth in the community. Since then, we actually are in our 5th season now of a program called Dodgers RBI, where we've built a youth development program. Yes, it's centered on baseball and softball, and we use baseball and softball as a hook, but it's education, it's health, and it's sports. We somewhat serve as a hub of resources to make sure that we bring together the right partners and the right experts to deliver key resources and key access to children in communities that we believe need it the most. And essentially, baseball is the hook. It really is the hook. We are not in the business of necessarily creating the future Major League Baseball all-star player, but we do believe that we can create Major League citizens, and the brand itself, the Dodgers, and the mission that we set out with every single day can truly create an impact and a direct impact for children in the communities.
That's great. And we're going to come back and talk about the program and some of the benefits back for you as an organization out of doing all of this stuff. But I wanted to move on to you next, Alina. And you know, having traveled and worked all around the world, I've kind of seen the power of soccer, as we call it here, football, as we call it in the rest of the world, to really be a major convener of good in the community. I mean, of all the sports, football really has community at its soul. It's what kind of differentiates it, I think, from many other sports. But I was really interested to read on your website. So you've only been active for a very short space of time. But I was really interested to just read on the website, and I'll read it out here because I think it kind of talks to what you're trying to do. But street by street, block by block, one by one, LA Football Club is committed to being a force for good in LA. We're dedicated to using the beautiful game of soccer as a vehicle for change. So that's a beautiful mission statement to have for a football team. Tell us a bit about how you're expressing that and bringing that to life.
I feel very lucky that when I joined LAFC just 5 months ago rather than 5 seasons ago, I came to a team that truly was committed to giving back to the community and built the entire team based off of the community. We're one of the, if not the only MLS stadium in the US that actually used our supporter group that was created about 2.5 years before we even had our first coach, our first team, anybody. We actually had our supporter groups advise us on how to build our stadium and what they wanted out of LAFC and what they felt that the community really needed in the world of soccer and what it could do to inspire and to unite the world city through the world's game. And they really did street by street, block by block, one by one, in very much the same grassroots way that I'm continuing to work a lot of my kind of foundation initiatives to continue hearing the voice of the community. So when LAFC in 2014 first got their bid, we had maybe 3 or 4 employees that just went right into the community. They went right into, you know, the soccer fan community, which is very hard to find in some areas in Los Angeles, those that wake up at 4:45 in the morning to watch the 5 a.m. games, which I've done. It's all of World Cup. So they went out and they just started asking questions. What are you looking for? What do you want? What was the difference with Chivas and Galaxy if we could do something new or different? You know, what could we bring to downtown Los Angeles, which has the access of the metro and has the access of more transportation? And that grassroots research is what led them to develop so many of the programs that they built and build a supporter group that within a year of us building our academy team, again, our academy was built before we had Bob Bradley, before we had Carlos Vela, before we had all these major players. Our 3252 supporter group had helped advise to build the stadium, and they were at every single academy game year one with drums and chants and energy and excitement. So it has been an incredible thing to see the energy of our community from all different parts of Los Angeles. This isn't just Expo Park area, it's on Sunday when I was in Huntington Park. It was Huntington Park, it's the Valley, it's you know, downtown Los Angeles, it's the South Bay, it's, you know, Hawthorne. Just bringing everyone together in one place to really experience soccer in a different way, in that European national way. And it's unbelievable to have the support of people like Nicole, who I've come in and been able to see what they've done with their foundation and know we're lucky that we've been grassroots and community-oriented, but what can I do now as a foundation to build off of what we've done as a club so that the foundation can really speak to that and continue building off of the community desires and needs? And, you know, yesterday, an Open Cup game, which was, you know, basically started selling tickets maybe 12, 14 days ago. We still had 10,000 people there, and our supporter group section was full. So it's been an amazing thing, and I can very much feel that our kind of community focus and also our focus of being inclusive. We're, again, one of the only teams that at the beginning of every game plays a video that says, when you come to our stadium, everyone is welcome. There is no hate. We do not use hateful terms and language. Yesterday, I had to ask someone to leave our stadium that was doing that. And I was okay with that because I wanted to preserve what it was that we were creating for our supporters that were standing shoulder to shoulder in our stands.
That's great. So Jeffrey, moving on to you next. So the other three panelists here will represent foundations that are connected to, I guess, the core business of their representative organizations. But you're here wearing an LA Chargers hat from a corporate perspective, which is really interesting. And I'd like to explore a little bit with you why that is so and why you think it's important for the organization to be connected to the community and how you're approaching that.
Well, community connection is very much the essence of what the Chargers are about. We are truly a football family, and family for us has an origin story that goes back 95, 85 years to the childhood of our patriarch, Alex Spanos, who bought the team more than 30 years ago. And Alex, as a child, and classic sort of immigrant story, rags to riches, he was not able or allowed to play sports. His father wanted him to work from a very early age, and that childhood experience never left Alex. And part of his inspiration for wanting to buy an NFL team and be involved in professional sports was part of his desire to use that vehicle as a way to create a positive force in the community that is very much about promoting physical fitness and football and health and wellness. And he also is someone who has had a lifelong commitment to making the community he lives in a better place, and that applies to the Chargers. We're a third-generation, family-owned and operated business. He passed the reins on to his son, Dean. Dean has recently passed the reins on to his two sons, AG and John, and through all three generations, driving the Chargers, managing, leading the Chargers, as not just a football team, but an organization and a team that is very focused to making the community a better place. It permeates everything that we do. So for us, it's more than the foundation which we have. It really is about making sure that every day we're doing something to make our community a better place. As most of you probably know, we've moved back to LA. We were born here in 1960, so we're sort of an LA original, but we were gone for a while, and this represents a new chapter in our history, but we've come into the community really with an open mind and listening and not rushing to decide how we want to connect from a community relations standpoint in LA. We're doing things that we have done in San Diego and have never stopped doing in San Diego, Chargers Champions and Play 60 and other initiatives that sort of weave in and out of every day. But we're also now focused on tentpole initiatives in Los Angeles that are very organic and important to the city. So we recently the mayor announced that we're supporting Summer Night Lights, which is all about creating a safe space in parks during the summer for at-risk youth and families in troubled neighborhoods. We're going to announce shortly an initiative with the Boys and Girls Club, and there'll be more to come. But that all happened after taking almost a year to really listen and understand LA. But to answer your question a little more succinctly, community commitment, it is who we are. You can't always count on winning on game day, but our view is that every day you can do something to help the community win, and that's what we're focused on.
Thank you. So the one, you all represent different sports, but the one thing that's consistent to all of you is that you all have athletes or players that are really the interface between the team and the community in many respects. And I was thinking about it the other day, and it's been really interesting to see how the role of the athlete is changing in society. And I just ask you all a question. If you think back over the last 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years maybe, who's the athlete that comes to mind as the kind of greatest activist athlete? Who do you think of when you think of an activist athlete back? Okay, so quite a few. The one that I thought of was Muhammad Ali. I mean, he's the kind of tip of the apex, so to speak. And then if you think about how things changed over the 70s, when society became very insular and everything became about me, myself, I, that kind of role of the athlete changed. Anyway, that's kind of how I look at it. But what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years is really interesting, where I think the athletes are starting to find their voice again and starting to recognize that they have an opportunity to stand up and lead in this discussion that we're talking about today and in making the world a better place through their platform. So Sherry, that's right at the coalface of what you do every day. And really interested to just understand from you how the players view this opportunity to connect and give back with the community through the work that you do. Can you catch it?
Hi, everyone. So I represent 450 professional basketball players. So answering as if they're a monolith is a very difficult thing to do. But I can say that in general, when these young men, some of them, who were just drafted last night, who are young enough to be my son, just to put that all in context, and obviously I'm very young.
40, 50, 60 years ago.
When they're coming, when they're coming in, and I think it's difficult for people to see their humanity in this. They're babies. They're walking in at 19, 18 years old, and they're bringing, hopefully, for many of them, the dreams and aspirations of multiple generations of their family. They're carrying all of that in with them. And so the weight that they're carrying is very heavy. When they get drafted, and and this is probably the same in all of our sports, right? It's never them by themselves. There's a table of people. There's a whole small neighborhood that's coming. And so I don't think there has ever been a time when athletes saw themselves as just them. I think they have always walked in with something more. And I think that's a really heavy burden. It's a burden that I watch them struggle with. The question is, what do I do? What do I do, especially because the minute I open my mouth, somebody's going to tell me to shut up and dribble. That becomes a really precarious line, a rope for them to walk, because you sort of live or die based on whether or not you're the kind of athlete that fans can root for. And so they're constantly sort of battered about whether or not they even have the right to speak about certain things. I was Chris Paul, who is the president of both the foundation and the union, retweeted the image of the young girl at the border last night. And I know not to do this, but I did it anyway. And I read the comments. And if you looked at the comments that sort of filtered down, they were all the usual ones, but then they were like, shut up and dribble. And so even the most elite athlete, a secure athlete who can write his own ticket and has a ton of currency and capital, there is still a question about whether or not he can speak. And so I think we have to remember that if they're not talking, it's not because they're just lazy, that this is a very, very difficult thing to navigate, and they're trying to find their way in. They're trying to find their voice, and we're trying to be here to help them do that.
But would you agree that there's been a very subtle shift over the last, actually it's not so subtle, there's been a real shift over the last couple of years where, and maybe I think it's led by people like LeBron and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, who are actually stepping forward, and Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed and these people who are stepping forward and taking that leadership position. And I think that's so important, because out of everybody within sport, the athletes are the ones that really have the equity to be able to pass on to other positive things. So
I totally agree, and I'm excited to see it. And I think I think the brotherhood of all athletes across sports has made some of that possible. I've watched NBA athletes support Colin. I've watched baseball and football players support the Big Four when they got up at the ESPYs. I think it was 2 years ago. So that has happened. I just don't want to. I think when people see it happening, they're like, "Well, it's about time. It's so easy for you to do that." And I think I always just want to emphasize how hard that is, how hard it is. And if you don't think it's hard, walk into your job tomorrow morning and take a knee and see how hard it is. It's actually quite difficult.
But I think it's a reflection of what's happening in society generally, which is, if you look across society, and it's happening here in the USA, perhaps more so than anywhere else. Fans, people, consumers, citizens, whatever you want to call them, are expecting organizations to stand for something more than just profits. And they're prepared to reward those that do. And that gives the athletes a license to stand up and say what they believe in, and it gives teams a license to do the same, but it's also good business. And that's the other part of this. And so, Jeffrey, just would love to explore with you the Fight for LA initiative that you've recently launched, because I think it's an amazing example of a professional sports team taking a stand and responsibility for doing something other than just winning the Super Bowl, in your case.
Well,
so let's just talk about that.
Before that, just to go back to the comment you made, I don't think it is as cut and dry as it's always good business to take a stand, because in the world that we live in today, more than ever before, there is a clear division among people on a whole host of things. So a stand in one direction may bring in a certain part of the population, but that same stand may create an issue with another. I think we live in a world right now where the line, unfortunately, is just so strong, and people seem to be falling either on one side or the other. I do think that, and obviously a big part of this conference, sport is an opportunity to try and blur that line a bit and bring people together. But I think it's very difficult. I think it's hard to be a professional athlete right now, in large part because of social media, but also because of how divided, at least this country, has become. And that, yep.
So I hear that, but if you have a look at what's happening in the business sector, businesses that are taking a stand for something, and it doesn't have to be political, it can be a stand for something, or outperforming those that aren't. So my point of view is that it's good business. Doing good is good business.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I believe if you don't stand for something, you end up standing for nothing.
Exactly.
And we believe that. I'm just simply making the point that it is more complicated today to sometimes take a stand than it has been.
So a great segue into Fight for LA, because that's something that everybody can relate to.
Yes, and
Okay,
something
so
that has been misunderstood, which is proving my point. So when the decision was made to move up to LA from San Diego, we needed to express a point of view about who we are and how we were going to approach the market, and we decided to embrace a platform that's known as the Fight for LA. And for us, it was very much about truth speaking. I think the best marketing is based in the truth. And this notion of fighting was very much our truth. It is meant to suggest that we don't expect anything to come easily to us in LA, that coming here from really just down the road, we would have to take the time to not only listen and learn about the community, but also earn the respect of the community, in part by how we do on the field, but to my earlier point, in part by how we do in the community and how we connect with the community and how we begin to see LA authentically. So the Fight for LA is really a call unto ourselves. It's not a challenge to anyone else. It's a challenge to ourselves every day to make sure that we do what Alex Spanos would have done and has done his whole life, which is roll up his sleeves and get the job done. So when you come to our offices, you can actually see on the wall, "Welcome to the fight." That is sort of a daily reminder to everyone that we have work to do. The work that we have to do is very much about finding ways to help make the community a better place. But having been away from Los Angeles since 1960, and that was a very different time and different franchise, we didn't come here resting on the fact that we were born here. We really came here with a sense of it's all new for us, and we've got to make sure we learn how to do it right. And there's a sense of humbleness to that too, which also reflects the Spanos family's attitude towards life. This year, we're going to evolve that campaign a bit, and you will hear us talking about fighting for each other, which is very much about what happens on the field, but also what we're trying to do in the community.
And I really commend you for that, because I think it's exactly the direction that sport needs to go, because I think we punch below our weight and can do much, much more. It's not a criticism, it's just an observation. And I'm sure that we'd love to be able to take, for example, Nicole, the great stuff that you do and amplify it tenfold. If you had the resources to do that, there's a need for it, and you'd do it, I'm sure. So tell us, let's just dig down into some of the detail now. So let's talk about some of the specific programs that you're engaged in, and with the focus on the good that they do in the community and the focus on young people and helping them to become their best selves.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go back to Dodgers Dream Fields, which was a program that launched in 2003, and we made a promise to build 50 baseball and softball fields in the Los Angeles community, in underserved communities here, in areas where there may not be baseball facilities or fields, or where they were in significant need of refurbishment. So we actually refurbish and we build fields. This year, we're really proud to say that we will build our 50th Dodgers Dream Field at Algin Sutton Recreation Center in South Los Angeles. We will break ground and have a grand opening for that field in September. And so just this past weekend, on Saturday morning, we dedicated fields 48 and 49 at Rim Grove Park in La Puente. It's all about partnership for us as far as how we do the fields. We work with the City of Los Angeles Rec and Park. We work with the County of Los Angeles Park and Recs. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was, 5 years ago, we looked at this and we said, hey, yes, we've built X amount of fields, and we've had great partners doing it, but what impact have these fields had in these communities? And we stopped and we took a pause. We built fields a lot slower so we could take a minute to actually put measurement and evaluation in place, to conduct surveys with families on the ground, with children utilizing the spaces, with coaches, with parents, and really get a real sense of what the impact has been. And we have learned that it does increase coaches' participation. It increases overall park usage. We've had our great sports partner team friends follow and create additional facilities at those locations, and so that's been awesome to watch. A lot of great positive things. We also learned a lot that helped us improve the program. We heard from different facilities that they didn't have the materials necessary that they needed to maintain the fields. So we started doing field maintenance clinics, per se, community service projects, so we don't necessarily just build and abandon. I think a lot of people sort of subscribe to the Kevin Costner Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. I'm not opposed to that phrase, but I think in certain communities, if you build it, they will likely come, and they will only come if they have transportation to do so, or they have money to do so, or they have equipment and resources to do so. And that sort of leads nicely into our Dodgers RBI program. So RBI stands for Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities, and it's been a Major League Baseball campaign since 1989. It was really initially all about creating an opportunity for youth, and especially African-American youth who were just not seen in baseball, an opportunity to participate, to play baseball and softball in the inner cities across the United States. LA RBI existed years ago, but 5 seasons ago, we actually launched Dodgers RBI, which is reviving baseball here in the city of Los Angeles. We started with 2,700 kids at a few locations with a number of partners a couple years ago, and now this year we're serving 10,000 kids at 68 locations in Los Angeles and in Long Beach. The idea, again, as I mentioned before, is not to have a baseball and softball program where we are building athletes who will all become Major League Baseball players. Some of them will, but the reality is most of them won't. And so why do we do it? We do it because we know that these kids otherwise would not be playing baseball and softball. We provide them with all of the equipment they need. We provide them with all of the uniform that they need. When I say that, I mean from the hat to the socks. And this season, we were lucky to be able to provide all 13 to 18-year-olds, even with cleats. We spend a lot of resources and we raise a lot of money from a lot of fans and a lot of foundations and a lot of corporations to, commingle and make this happen. But ultimately, it gives kids an engagement tool. We are pulling them together a lot at these dream fields that we've built in a place in their communities where they can come together with other kids, where they can be away from the elements that would take them in a totally different direction as far as life in general is concerned, where they can enjoy sport, where they can build sportsmanship, where they can build teamwork, where they can work on just having fun and being interested in something. We also employ a lot of other resources within the Dodgers RBI program. So we take kids on college tours. We bring fitness clinics to the locations. We work with partners and we do financial literacy at those locations. We engage with the adults as well. So we do coaches training. Coaches training is actually mandatory for all Dodgers RBI coaches. And so we do coaches training. We provide the grants now to make sure that they are able to offset field maintenance and umpire fees. We did a study before we even launched RBI, and we conducted about 200 interviews on the ground here in LA, clearly to understand what people felt were the hugest challenges and deterrents to kids playing baseball and softball, or just being engaged in youth activity at their local recreation centers or parks. And umpires is a big deal. Costs a lot of money. Costs a lot of money to maintain fields. Baseball is not the cheapest sport by far. Basketball, you can get a ball and some shoes and you're probably gonna be okay. Baseball, you think about the equipment that's necessary, you think about the uniform that's necessary, there's a lot that goes into that. So we do believe, and we've seen already with a lot of our stats, James Lopez is actually our Dodgers RBI analyst. He's here in the audience today. We have an analyst on our team whose role it is to maintain not just the demographics of the audience that we serve, but in real time be able to tell us who's playing at these locations, what do they think about the program. We implement a very detailed survey within everything that we do. We actually are participating in a pilot program with an organization called Algorithm Now, which is a national pilot program to really look at a specific segment that we're serving, those kids that we know drop off at a certain age, to make sure that we're understanding why they do that and what are some of the things that we can do to prevent that. So ultimately, we're finding out really great outcomes from the overall program, and we know that what we're doing is working. There's a couple things that we probably most certainly need to tweak. The secret sauce is the partnerships. It's the foundations, it's the corporations, it's the nonprofits, many who are in this room today, like PCA and others who work with us to deliver the services to the youth, to the families. It's important, we found as a foundation, to be on the ground. It's a lot of work, but it's important for us to be on the ground. And so while building the fields is important, having programming at facilities is just as important. These families need to see that the Dodgers Foundation, we care about them, and we use sport, what we're good at and what we can talk about as the hook, and bring others in to help us deliver.
I'm exhausted just listening to you. It's amazing. What do you do? Do you have a personal life outside of all of this? I mean,
no. I have 2 boys who play lots of baseball, and that goes really well with this.
So, Lena, it's a good segue into some of the programming that you're starting to develop now in your young program. I was particularly taken by the youth leadership program and this, the focus on helping to develop leaders that can then help to scale the impact that happens. I guess that's what sits behind it all. Tell us about it.
So YLP is a fantastic program that uses high school students, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and builds leadership skills for those students by having those kids actually run soccer clinics, after-school tutoring, and mentorship for younger students within the middle schools that are feeding into their high school. What's great about it is that it's run through a youth center. Brazil is similar to what you would see in a Boys and Girls Club, except that it provides additional support support also to parents, community, anywhere from nutrition, financial aid, helping students that are both at risk, kids that are gifted, and providing programs after school that then can help develop those skill sets and help parents also, provide that additional support at home or with their students. And the YLP kids, what's superb about it is that most of these kids are actually kids that were very much at risk for dropping out or becoming juvenile students in their freshman year. And that's something that really surprised me. My background came from an education nonprofit that I ran for about 7 years. And these were kids that we started to identify in the 6th grade, kids that we felt that were promising and that could succeed, but knew we had to start younger because by the time they were in 8th grade or in high school, we had lost them to a lot of gangs and kind of street culture and the neighborhood culture rather than kind of a penchant or desire to do something with education or something beyond it. So to see these kids be brought into this program as sophomores, kids that probably their freshman year were looking at GPAs of 1.5 if not failing, that by their senior year, after 3 years of being leaders and mentors and kind of feeling this role of responsibility and accountability, something other than yourself, these kids are graduating with GPAs of 3.7s, 3.8s, and are enthusiastic, excited, and very much ready for college. They are getting, on top of the support that they're providing to their mentees and what they're building leadership-wise by running these clinics themselves, rather than having LAFC run the clinics or Academy run the clinics, they're also getting resume work, they're getting etiquette workshops, they're getting interview prep, they're getting college access support by visiting universities and learning about what schools are and what they have access to and what financial aid looks like. For those kids that are DACA students, providing that additional support for them and their families to know what schools to apply to, what the scholarships are that are available. And these kids are, I did an interview with all 15 of them heading to college next year, and all 15 are college ready. Kids that if you looked at their freshman year transcript, I would have told you they're a lost cause. So to me, this has been a really special program to get to know, and also to support kind of from the bottom up to see what can we do to scale this program. If this is something that we're really going to take and run with, how can we scale it? How can we bring it across all of Los Angeles? And what I've done is really looked at so much of the work that the Dodgers has done and also looked at our tagline, one by one, street by street, block by block, and said, okay, how can we build, let's say, new courts or refurbished soccer fields and make sure that they're in areas where we could then scale our YLP program so that those courts could then be activated by those students and then potentially find a way to then activate them also on the weekends. So we are very close to following up with a program that would create, we're not putting a number on it, but we would love to be able to hit our 50 number mark at some point, but to build either 50 futsal courts or refurbish also soccer fields across LA and make sure that they're in schools that would then be able to open doors after school and on the weekends, making sure that schools then are also becoming community centers and can be activated by several youth programs, including something like the Youth Leadership Program. And that would really help college access results, again, uniting the world city through the world's game, and building leadership, supporting youth, and connecting all of the many programs that we want to build together. So it's an ecosystem of grantees and of programs. Again, it's all about collaboration. Very much believe in working with the other teams across Los Angeles, the other nonprofits, and that's really the only way that we would be successful in making sure that kids have access to these courts and have access to these types of programs as well.
That's great. So, Sherry, when I think about what you spoke about earlier about, I think you said 450 athletes that you represent, I can imagine that there are probably 450 different things that they care about. But the one kind of theme that I see coming through, having spoken to you and your communication and your positioning, is this idea of sport as a community builder. It seems to be a really strong theme, and this idea that it's from the players to the community, that it's it's around their personal passions and the things that they care about. Are there some stories or examples that you can share with us of things that have worked really well, where players have engaged around a purpose, something that they care about, and it's made a big difference in a community?
Yeah, so as I'm sitting here, I'm envious of the ability to be able to focus on one place. So we fund in, I think, 40 states and 17 countries outside of the United States. just because, like baseball, we're a very international sport, so we have players that hail from 43 countries around the world. So the number of things that they're interested in is just so broad. I think pretty much everything but bunnies we've done. It's just, and every time they come in, I'm like, what? Now I've got to go research something new, which is wonderful. It's exciting and speaks to just how evolved today's human being is, what their capacity to care about things. But your question about sports, and I think what makes it so powerful, is that there's an emotion that happens when people watch and play that I think is unparalleled. Maybe music and art has a very similar feeling, but there is this this wonderful connection that happens, and I think our players have learned how to use sports as a conduit to deliver all kinds of other things. And they start with a clinic and end up doing hearing tests. I mean, that's how Dikembe Mutombo and Gorgie Dang have expanded their work across the DRC. Bringing kids out to play basketball and then getting them tested for all kinds of other things. So there is this sort of way that people embrace them because they can connect with them, because there's this humanity that comes out when people play and watch the game that I think makes their work, the possibility of their work, really powerful.
And I'd like you to talk a little bit about Everyday Dad.
Oh.
Because I think that's an amazing initiative that really talks to what it means to be a good man.
Yeah.
And how, basketball players, all athletes get a bad... We only hear the stories of the athletes that do bad things, not
Yeah.
about the athletes that do good things. So
Yeah.
just talk about that initiative and how that was something that you rallied a number of people around.
We did, and I was shocked, because one of the things that's the hardest thing to do, maybe it's just hard for me, is like wrangling players and getting them to do things. It's just really hard. There's a lot of people pulling on them. But Everyday Dad, and you can, if you can, everydaydad.mbpa, I think is what it is. It started because I sat down with the Fathers Association. So in the NBA, there's a Wives Association, a Mothers Association, a Fathers Association, and I just went to meet with them my first year, actually my first month on the job, and was asking them about their projects because we give them a little bit of funding, and they said, the thing that we want to have happen most is for people to stop ignoring us as fathers. And stop disparaging our sons as fathers. Like, that was the one thing that they wanted. And whatever it is about our narrative around professional athletes, it's usually that the game saved them, right? They were living in a crack den with a single mom, and if it weren't for the game, nothing would have happened. And here I am sitting in front of Chris Paul's dad and D Wade's dad and a few other fathers that are part of this group, and they were like, I taught my son how to play, and I coached him until he was in high school. And now he's doing the same, and I couldn't be prouder of that. And so we started to tell those stories. And the first 6 stories that we told were Chris Bosh, Chris Paul, Harvey Grant, who has 2 sons, who are now, Harvey Grant is a twin, Horace Grant's brother, and then he has Jeremy and Jarian, who are in the league right now, but at that time, the youngest was graduating from Duke. Mario Chalmers, and I'm gonna forget a few others. And when we asked them to tell the story of their own fatherhood and their own fathers, they didn't hesitate. And all we did was put them on a couch and turned on a camera. And we got a wonderful interviewer to just ask them questions. We didn't prep them at all. And I think there's this wonderful thing that happened in all of the videos where you could tell that the father was hearing his son verbalize these things for the first time, right? And there's a moment in Chris Boss's video where he talks about that his dad was everybody's dad, and he had this old beat-up van, and everyone would pile in the van, and he would do something, and he was telling the story as if it happened yesterday, and his dad turned to him and said, "You remember that?" And there was just this beautiful exchange that happened. And then you realize the importance of the story and the humanity of people and how people connect, and how even though these are millionaire players, it's the little things that still matter. And so that was beautiful. And when I said to Chris, your videos like had so many views on YouTube. And he was like, "Oh yeah, but that's all little Chris." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "He watches it constantly." And I was like, "Well, I don't understand." He's like, "What I realized after we did it is that we actually don't have a document of all 3 generations of my family on camera. That was the first time, like as much as I'm on camera, I've never sat down and talked and had all of the men in my family lined up." And so it was a valuable piece to him, and his son, who sees him all the time, just could not get enough of it. So we knew we had something.
Yeah, well, congratulations for that. It was amazing. So we're running out of time, and hopefully what you've taken away from this discussion today is that sport has an amazing ability to do so many different things. I mean, we've heard examples that are so diverse in terms of their application. And it's really about finding what the right fit is for your organization and identifying what is the role that you can play and you want to play. And I guarantee you that every single one of you sitting in this room today has the opportunity to use your platform for some positive outcome in whatever shape or form. And I think that really comes to the essence of what this conference is all about. So we have a few minutes left. I think we have 4 or 5 minutes left. And I wanted to see if there's anybody that had any questions for the panel. Have we got the back there? Can you just shout out?
Yeah, I can shout out.
Great, thank you.
The panel down here, you have soccer, baseball, basketball. What other sports or entities have you partnered with for youth sports? When you're out on the streets, you're out on the playground to present your baseball day. Have you partnered with soccer, or is soccer partnered with tennis, or that kind of thing?
I'll answer that. They are not on this panel, but we have a ongoing partnership with the Lakers Youth Foundation. They are the sponsors of the fitness clinics that we produce within the Dodgers RBI program that I mentioned earlier. So across the season, from about April to August, we do 7 co-partnered fitness clinics at 7 different community locations throughout Los Angeles. And those are actually the most popular event program element outside of the baseball and softball practices and games within Dodgers RBI.
I think that's a really good point that you raised, this idea of collaboration, and we spoke about it earlier. You spoke about the Rams actually not being competitors of yours in this marketplace, despite the fact that you would think that you are. And I don't know if some of you saw the announcement by the NFL this week around their sustainability commitments, and they've just joined the Green Sports Alliance. And they actually spoke about the fact that when it comes to these kind of issues around sustainability, social, environmental, economic sustainability, it's not a competitive space. So that's quite something coming from the NFL, to hear them make a statement like that. And I think kind of typifies how things are changing really quickly in this space, which I think is really heartening.
I think just to add to that too, we all have a fundraising arm, and what's really nice is that we support each other's fundraising activities, especially at least a fundraising event. So a lot of the teams have golf tournaments or galas or things of that nature, and it's nice that we actually come together and sort of exchange and make sure that we're supporting each other's events, which ultimately are impacting youth in the communities.
Okay, any other questions?
I was going to add quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry, Elena.
Just
Sorry.
because I love, of course, mentioning that as well. I think collaboration is the key to success. Just like the Positive Coaching Alliance loves to say, the most important piece of the Positive Coaching Alliance isn't positive or coaching, it's alliance. And having come from running an education nonprofit that was national for 7 years that had athletic components to it, I jumped into a space that I really knew nothing about. And if it hadn't been for Nicole over at the Dodgers, if it hadn't been for Lauren at the Galaxy, if it hadn't been for the folks that I'd met just at PCA conferences through Chargers, Rams, etc., I really would have struggled jumping into this space and doing it with confidence and with the ownership that I needed to really have the impact that we wanted. So I can honestly say that if it wasn't for working with the other teams, I don't think we would have, or I wouldn't have the same confidence and success jumping into the rest of this season. And again, whether it's galas, events, etc., we're always supporting each other. We have a group that will be going to an RBI event. Dodgers has, given gifts to us for our games. And we love this kind of idea of if there is a, baseball field, can we put and refurbish the soccer field and then have community events where you're having a soccer tournament, baseball tournament, basketball tournament, etc., all going on at the same time while also providing other community factors. I think that is the #1 way to win because you touch everyone, despite the sport that they're interested or what it is. It's all just teamwork, fun, and enthusiasm.
Okay, one more. Sure. He beat you to it, Alan, sorry. Yep.
We've heard a lot today about lack of equity between male and female or boys and girls athletics. I know that all of you represent teams or leagues that are made up of men. In the work that you do with the communities or your foundations do you think about that lack of equity? How do you try to make sure that you are not only benefiting young boys or men in athletics, but also girls?
I'll be quick. For me, I was born in Mexico City, and a lot of what's happened, I think, with some of the equity differences, many times is cultural. When I moved to the U.S., I was never encouraged to play sports. It was just not something we did. I watched telenovelas, I hung out with the family. My brothers got into football, and they Americanized in 2 seconds, but I was still speaking Spanish at home and very much not integrating in that way. And I think it was a major disservice to me, which is what really drew me to this position and wanting to create more access for females in sports, especially knowing the community that we're really serving has a very large Hispanic and other diverse population where culturally it's just not common for women to be involved with that. And I know we're very much committed to trying to change that landscape so that women can benefit in the same way from what you get out of the teamwork, the inclusion, and just the confidence and leadership skills that you get from that team building experience.
For us, all of our fitness programs are for both boys and girls. Boys and Girls Club, our Play 60 clinics, everything that we do in the community is for both boys and girls.
And similarly, we've been very deliberate about inclusion of girls and not just softball, but baseball as well. Within our youth development program, we have an average growth rate of about 37% a year over the last 5 years in terms of girls' participation. We work very closely with the Mayor's Wife's Initiative, Girls Play LA. And so with the City of LA Rec and Parks, we've made sure that that's like a staple within what we're doing. And we've created a co-partnership there. Within Dodgers Dreamfields, I'm really happy to say that the 50th Dreamfield this fall is actually designed as a softball field. We realized that a lot of the former fields were not designed for girls to play on if they were playing softball specifically. And so you'll find a lot of infield dirt-only fields in the future because we want to make sure that they are accessible. And obviously, if you make it a softball field, younger youth can actually use the field for baseball. So it is compatible in that sense. But we've been very deliberate. Our director of our Dodgers RBI program, Tiffany Rubin, is a former college softball player. And so she's very intentional with making us ensure that we're making it a consistent priority within the work that we do.
Great. So that's a wrap from us. We have to get permission from David.
I have 10 seconds. I just read in the ticker at the last break. It's just 1 inch at a time, 1 foot at a time. AS Roma in Italy announced today that they're launching a professional women's football team.
Oh, there you go. Changes are happening. So thank you very much. It's been a great discussion. We should do it again. Thank you.